Hello, everyone, and welcome to ITMO, Instant Transformation Moment. Can you be conscious without thought? Can you be conscious without thought? Most people say no when they're asked this question. They've tried and failed. But in fact, the answer is yes. You can be conscious without thought. And today, we're going to do a little experiment so you can prove this to yourself in your own experience. So you don't have to believe me about it. You can experience the truth that you can be conscious without thinking. Now, it's only for a moment. This experiment will just give you the experience of consciousness without thought for a moment, but that's sufficient. A moment of thought-free consciousness is sufficient because that opens you to a new dimension beyond the mind. And once that new dimension is opened, you can then abide in that new dimension even while thoughts resume, because now you're experiencing thoughts from a higher dimension of consciousness, free of the mind. So let's do this experiment together now so that you can confirm for yourself that you can be conscious without thinking, even though it may only be for a moment, at least initially. Now, this experiment requires us to attend to the process of breathing. So bring your attention to your breathing. Just notice at the end of the in-breath, there's a slight pause when you're neither breathing in or breathing out. Now, you don't have to hold your breath. In fact, it's important not to hold your breath, because if you hold your breath, you won't have this experience that we're talking about. So just notice at the end of the in-breath, there's a slight pause when you're neither breathing in or breathing out. Now there's a similar pause at the end of the out-breath when you're neither breathing in or breathing out, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that pause today. We're just going to focus on that pause at the end of the in-breath. So just find that pause again. So each time you come to the end of the in-breath, just notice that pause in the breathing, that natural pause when you're neither breathing in or breathing out. See, most people never even noticed there was a pause there. They just assumed that breathing was a matter of breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. But when you examine your actual experience, you discover there is a short pause there, right? At the end of the in-breath. Just find that pause again. Okay, so now that you've found that pause in the breathing at the end of the in-breath, I want you to observe what happens to your thinking mind in that pause, okay? So each time you come to that pause at the end of the in-breath, that pause in the breathing, examine what happens to the thought process. What happens to your thinking mind in that pause in the breathing? the thinking stops as well, doesn't it? When the breathing pauses for a moment, the thinking also pauses for a moment. Just check it out for yourself. Yeah, it's true, isn't it? The thinking pauses for a moment. It's a bit like, breathing is the engine for thought. And when breathing pauses, the thinking pauses. Just confirm it again for yourself. Right? It's true, isn't it? In that pause in the breathing, at the end of the in-breath, the thinking process also pauses just momentarily. It's only a split second, right? But it's an actual pause in the thinking. Just confirm it again for yourself. Right? Each time you come to that pause in the breathing, you also discover the thinking pauses. Now, check out how it feels in that pause. How does it feel in that pause in the breathing when the thinking also pauses? What's the feeling like? How does it feel for you in that pause? It feels peaceful, doesn't it? Isn't that right? Feels peaceful. Just check it out again yourself. Right, it's peaceful, isn't it? And that's because it's the thinking that introduces the disturbance. So when the thinking pauses, you just feel peaceful. So what we've established here with this little experiment is that in that pause of the breathing, the mind pauses and you feel peaceful and you are still conscious, right? You are conscious, aren't you, in that pause at the end of the in-breath? Your consciousness hasn't disappeared. You haven't suddenly gone to sleep. You're still conscious, but there's no thinking happening, right? In other words, you have discovered consciousness without thought. And you discovered this reliably. You can always find that space of consciousness without thought. It's always there at the end of the in-breath, available. And you can always find it in any moment. You see, what you've discovered here is that consciousness is your native reality, and that the thinking process is a layer superimposed on consciousness. But the truth of reality is consciousness itself, free of thinking. Now, it's certainly true that when breathing resumes, then the thoughts resume, typically. But now you're in a new position relative to thought. Now, having experienced that moment of thought-free consciousness in the still point at the end of the in-breath, now you've opened a new dimension beyond the mind. the dimension of consciousness itself. And now you can experience thoughts when they resume from another dimension, the dimension of consciousness itself. And that means that your thoughts take on a different meaning. You are now the witness of your thoughts. You are not the victim of your thoughts, right? Your thoughts no longer control you because you're simply in a position to witness them from consciousness itself. And even though that moment of consciousness itself, free of thinking, was very brief, nevertheless, it's opened up a new dimension beyond the mind, a dimension the mind knows nothing of. The mind knows nothing of this dimension of consciousness itself. The mind only knows thoughts, right? So the mind might be a bit astonished to discover that there is a dimension beyond the mind. So the mind likes to assume that thinking is the only window on reality that there is. Because for the mind, that's the truth. For the mind, thinking is the only window on reality. But the truth of the matter is beyond the mind. The truth of the matter is that consciousness is prior to the mind, and the mind is a dimension that floats on top of consciousness. And when you discover the native condition of consciousness itself, it's perfectly obvious to you that thoughts are simply a modification of consciousness. They're not the only window on reality. Consciousness is your window on reality, and thoughts are simply a secondary byproduct of consciousness. So each time you come to that still point at the end of the in-breath, when you're neither breathing in or breathing out, just observe. You're feeling peaceful. The mind pauses, and you are being consciousness itself. This is called being the soul. You've transitioned from mind to soul, from ego to soul. This is the most profound discovery in human experience. When you discover this, your true nature is actually consciousness itself, not the mind, not the body. You were never the mind or the body. You were always consciousness itself, but you didn't know that. Your mind didn't know that. And this is how you discover the truth. It's a profound truth. It's a most moving discovery. And it frees you from the pain of believing that your mind is who you are, which is a torment, an excruciating pain that imprisons you in the thought process and is responsible for unimaginable suffering. And this is how you escape it, by discovering the truth in your experience of that short pause at the end of the in-breath. Now I want to show you some slides. We're going to build on this experience in order that you could learn how to activate spiritual intelligence in any moment that you choose. So let me bring up some slides now so I can illustrate the method. So this symbol represents 3 dimensions of intelligence: IQ, intellectual intelligence; EQ, emotional intelligence; and SQ, spiritual intelligence. And the symbol opens out into the twin poles of attention. We have the object pole of attention and the subject pole of attention. So at the object pole is everything you're aware of: thoughts and emotions and memories and beliefs, self-image, all possible states of body and mind. And at the subject pole of attention is simply awareness itself, consciousness itself. So this represents the basic human operating system. You're either at the object pole or the subject pole. You're either identified with objects of attention, thoughts and emotions, the body, the mind, or you're identified with the subject of attention, awareness itself. And let me just show you another slide now. So this slide here summarizes what we've just discussed. And as you can see, the ego is identified with objects of attention, and the soul is identified with the subject of attention, consciousness itself. Now, spiritual intelligence consists of shifting from ego to soul, shifting from identifying with the object pole to identifying with the subject pole. Now, to do so, we have to go through this mechanism of attention, because that's what connects the 2 poles of attention. So let's have a look at this mechanism. Now, there's 3 simple steps through this mechanism that rapidly take you from ego to soul. And these steps are notice, feel, and be. In a moment, I'm going to describe what these steps are so that you know exactly what to do to shift from ego to soul, from false self to true self, and therefore activate your spiritual intelligence. Now, the exercise we did earlier, of course, is very much part of this process. So step 1, notice, is simply a matter of noticing the human operating system, ego and the soul, object pole and subject pole. Now you might say, but how do I know that that's the human operating system? Well, it's very simply, just observe that whatever arises to your attention, you are the one aware of it, right? So doesn't matter what it is, whatever arises to your attention, body, mind, thought, emotion, perception, you are the one aware of it. And so you are at the subject pole as the true self, as the soul, consciousness itself. And what you're aware of is at the object pole, thoughts and emotions and beliefs and so on. So step 1, notice, is simply noticing that your operating system has these 2 poles. Step 2 is feel. Now here's where we do the same exercise we did at the beginning, where we feel what it's like in that still point at the end of the in-breath, when you are neither breathing in or breathing out. So let's do it again now. Just find that still point at the end of the in-breath, when you're neither breathing in or breathing out. Notice how it feels there. Feels peaceful, doesn't it? And notice that the thinking process has paused for a moment. So each time you come to that still point at the end of the in-breath, feel that peaceful feeling. And as you're feeling that peaceful feeling, move to step 3, be. Be that peaceful feeling. That simply means allow that peaceful feeling to go all over your body and mind. So take a look around now. Just confirm for yourself that you are now being the field of consciousness itself. You are no longer being your body or your mind or your emotions. Sure, you're aware of all those things, but you're not being them. You're now simply being the field of awareness within which those objects of attention arise. This is called using your spiritual intelligence. And notice that it's not only peaceful, all the other qualities of spiritual intelligence spontaneously emerge when you're in this position of being consciousness itself. Qualities like compassion and joy and love and creativity and integrity, all these qualities and capabilities naturally emerge when you activate your spiritual intelligence. So your spiritual intelligence is never more than a breath away. It's right there with you, and you can activate it in any moment by being conscious of that still point at the end of the in-breath. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to know, isn't it? And so you can activate your spiritual intelligence whenever you choose, in any circumstances, whether the circumstances are pleasant or unpleasant. Even in the most adverse circumstances, you can still breathe in, feel that still point at the end of the in-breath, discover that peaceful feeling there. Notice your mind pauses and feel the peace of your soul. No matter what is happening, you can do this whenever you choose to do it. So this is a key to a higher dimension that you can now use for the rest of your life, whenever you choose to, whenever you remember to. Now, I hope you'll experiment with this yourself during the day so that you confirm for yourself that this is the truth. It's not just something that I'm telling you. It's not just something that you're believing. It's something that you can experience beyond doubt in your own experience, such that you can be completely certain that this is the truth of existence, that you are consciousness itself, and you can be free of all the complications and suffering of the ego state of awareness whenever you choose, whenever you use this method, which is the most rapid method of shifting from ego to soul and activating spiritual intelligence. And now, of course, this is something that is of great benefit for us individually. And that's why we get together every week at the same time to experience our spiritual intelligence together. So I do encourage you to join us next week at the same time, Wednesdays at 12 noon GMT, so that you can exercise this capability and build a brain that easily can experience your spiritual intelligence whenever you choose. Now, we're not just doing this for ourselves, of course. We're doing this so that we can contribute to global awakening. Now, you might ask, well, how does that work exactly? How come us doing it as a group can actually result in affecting the world? Well, let me tell you a story just to illustrate how this works. This is a story about the 100th monkey. You may have heard of it. It concerns an island in the Pacific where a troop of monkeys lived. And this troop of monkeys was being studied by some scientists in the early 1950s. And what these scientists did was they provided sweet potatoes for the monkeys, who seemed to enjoy eating them. And the scientists scattered these sweet potatoes on the beach every day for the monkeys to eat. And one day, one of the scientists observed one of the monkeys washing the sweet potato in the sea before it consumed it, washing the sand off. I guess the sand felt gritty and unappetizing. So this clever monkey was washing the sweet potatoes first before eating them. And soon other monkeys started to copy this, because they also discovered the sweet potatoes tasted better without sand all over them. And by the time 100 monkeys were doing the same thing, washing their sweet potatoes, they discovered that suddenly the whole island of monkeys was doing the same thing. And that's why this story is called The 100th Monkey. As soon as it got to a tipping point of 100 monkeys, the whole island, hundreds, thousands of monkeys were doing the same thing with their sweet potatoes. But the story doesn't stop there. The truly amazing thing about this story is that they discovered that monkeys on other islands that were completely separate from this island, those monkeys started doing the same thing with no communication between the first island, where the monkeys were washing their potatoes, and these other islands. These monkeys on other islands were doing the same thing, washing their food in the sea before they consumed it. Now, this is what really puzzled scientists. How is this possible? Suddenly, when one troop of monkeys learned something, other troops of monkeys on islands totally separate from this group of monkeys suddenly are doing the same thing. Now, this was explained by Rupert Sheldrake, a scientist from Oxford, who explained it in terms of morphic resonance. In other words, species have their own collective consciousness. And when the collective consciousness of a species is affected, every member of that species can draw down the discoveries in the collective consciousness so that every member of the species has access to the collective consciousness. Now, it's the same for us humans. When we establish this pathway in our own consciousness, the pathway from ego to soul, via these 3 steps, notice, feel, and be. And when we establish this pathway as a group, we're acting like the 100th monkey. We become the group of 100 monkeys who then pass this discovery to the larger group. And then from the larger group, to the whole of humanity. So we're establishing a new pathway in collective consciousness. The more that we practice this method together, a new pathway which will make it easier and easier for other human beings to duplicate this pathway and to find their own spiritual intelligence much more easily than they would have been able to do so without this new pathway that we're establishing. So when we get together every week at ITMO to experience this instant transformation, we're doing so not just for ourselves, for our own benefit, but to contribute to global awakening by establishing a new pathway in collective human consciousness. So this is why we get together every week. I do hope you'll join us next week for another experience of spiritual intelligence. You'll find in the above this video links to other pages which will give you further information. So I'll say goodbye for now, and I hope to see you next week. If you have any questions, please feel free to share your questions in the comments below this video, and I will answer them as best I can. So it's goodbye for now, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.